So, besides having backup heart for people I've discussed before to keep them alive, another useful thing would be to have a backup lung or lung heart combo. The compression of the heart can be used, and expansive can be used to also drive a pump for air. This air pump would then be able to make sure your body has enough air during these circumstances, like if you're losing a lot of blood or if you're fainting. Because remember, like CPR mostly consists actually of two things: chest compressions and breathing. This could also help in events where the heart is not blocked as much, but you're choking or something. Now, or stuff that kills you slowly from oxygen deprivation, like certain illnesses. To some extent, oxygen deprivation has been a little bit implicated, stuff like COVID or breathing. Now, of course, if the airway is completely blocked, you'll still die. But even if the airway, if you're able to have something that's more efficient than a lung, and if it's partly blocked, well, then you still get more air. It might also increase endurance in some ways and get people to be more active and exercise more, which might lead to more health benefits. So let's go with some numbers to talk about, is this reasonable? Well, the human body pumps about 5 to 6 milliliters. Well, the human body uses about 5 to 6 milliliters of oxygen every minute, or pumps that inside on average. There's a lot of things that will make it bigger or smaller. But for backup, we do not need the full capacity of more than that. And also, I want to point out that if you have a backup heart and stuff, and backup lungs and hearts use up a lot of energy. So if they're not running with the same oxygen, maybe you could save energy there. Maybe not. It depends on what's powering those devices, how efficient they are, which is a discussion I might get into end depending on the time. So you breathe in, though, 7 to 8 liters a minute about. Now, air composition is about 21% oxygen. So now that air composition is about 21% oxygen, you actually should get a lot more than you would expect. You should get a lot more oxygen to your lungs, because that means that in the amount of oxygen you breathe in, you get about 1.47 to 1.68 liters of oxygen a minute. But that's not what we're saying. That's because the lungs are incredibly inefficient. First of all, whenever you squeeze your lungs shut, not all the air gets pushed out. Some of it stays in the lung. Then not all the air is transferred in between the different membranes. So you have that. Then your lung is overbuilt to absorb more oxygen when it needs to. So it's not always working at full capacity. It's also designed to not achieve very high pressures where you can extract more oxygen. So at high pressures, it would more likely burst or get damaged. There's a lot of safety things because it can get infected, or other things like extra mucus and stuff that gets in the way of it absorbing oxygen. There's vortices and stuff that causes it air not to move the best around the whole thing to get absorbed. There's some air not to touch pills to get absorbed, or just tendency goes into moving air doesn't really impact stuff. And also, there's regions where more air is absorbed than other regions, but that slows down the overall air, because it's not, when you absorb more air from a particular region, the less concentrated oxygen is, the harder to absorb it. And because there's uneven absorption in parts of the lung, it actually slows down the absorption with how we do it. And then the pressure in the lung, so some quick numbers about that. The pressure in the lung is only about 112% the pressure there is in only reaches about 112% of pressure there is in the outside atmosphere. Not that much pressure at all. We only absorb about 25. We could absorb, if we had fully efficient, we would be absorbing like 25 to 38 times the amount of oxygen. So how could we make a device that is compact and small that could fit in your body reasonably and absorb so much more oxygen? Because we don't want a huge artificial lung. We want this to be a backup. And the bigger thing it is, the harder it is to handle in surgery and stuff, and more likely it gets in the way of other stuff. Well, if we use much higher pressures in this local small device, oxygen can absorb get much better. Roughly, to a very first order approximation, how much more pressure times it is how much better. So if we can easily achieve a fan 4 or more times pressure, I just did it for my calculations just like a couple times, but you can go 4 more easily, probably over 10 times. You can also, there's a lot of cheap ways of actually concentrating oxygen, and it also goes roughly up with the concentration of oxygen, how much times better it's absorbing. One way of cheaply concentrating oxygen is to use membranes that only let oxygen through, and then you put in charge through these membranes. That charge through these membranes takes oxygen, makes in the ion, and moves it to the other one, because negative now attracts the positive end, where it gets deposited out and becomes an electron then goes back into the circuit, and oxygen becomes not an ion anymore, which quickly sucks in just oxygen. And you can do this with special ceramics and plastics in a mixture in some special liquids. This can be done pretty close to your body temperature, or at your body temperature. This concentrated oxygen can be easily 4 times concentrated oxygen as it is in the outside world. Not only can it easily be this 4 times 1, if it's only oxygen moving and hitting the barrier that separates the blood and the gases, you have more of a direct flow of oxygen hitting it and going in instead of nitrogen stuff that might be bouncing off and knocking oxygen away from it. So it's more likely to pierce the barrier and go in. Another one is to use counterflow more in the device, which our lungs do not have, and make the flow more laminar. Now, what counterflow is that the blood would, I'll just draw this quickly. The blood, this is a really ugly arrow, will be going one direction, and the oxygen or gases will be going the other direction. So going opposite directions. That leads to the most efficient absorption of materials, and could easily be 2 or more times more efficient make this device than lungs with oxygen going randomly in all different ways and other gases. And that's because the least concentrated, the most concentrated gas, where we use the least amount of oxygen, hits blood that has the most difficulty absorbing oxygen, but these two things counteract, and the air that has the least amount of oxygen hits blood that pulls oxygen the most. They kind of counteract to make the most steady thing in this specific scenario. Also, they're moving in different directions, so they're more likely to mix together well. This easily can make it so we can do this artificial thing, could easily be moving fractions, like tens of fractions of the amount of air that your lungs do to absorb as much oxygen in your actual body. These pumps then can be used, this compression of oxygen and stuff can be used to compress a chamber to pump out blood, compactifying it more, because of the same energy you're using to pump blood, the same thing you're using to pump blood, you're using to pump oxygen, vice versa, back and forth. And not only that, you can also these vibrations by both of these devices have been shown to stop blood clots. The reason why we don't have a continuous artificial heart, for many reasons, but one of it is we found that continuous operating artificial hearts with no pulses and pumps instead of chambers, the blood starts clotting more. Something about the heart beating actually causes less clumping, and this will do that partly. So, but getting to energy to the system might be more expensive because the body is incredibly energy efficient. And it might be that we have to make some type of generator or battery or something, which is unfortunate to carry around. You can fit a lot of energy in a small battery, but then you have to recharge it. And many batteries have dangerous chemicals, so you have that whole talk. Or you would have to figure out some artificial way of making energy in the human body based on waste products or something, which might use up some oxygen itself. Well, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe. It really helps channel out. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers in a year and 4,000 watch hours, which is really hard, really help I think to do it. Also, if any of these are future videos, comments, or suggestions, please leave in the comment section below. Again, thank you very much. Goodbye.